Looks like everybody who is in the
folks.
All right, so I guess we can go ahead and get started. It's 12:01, and so my name's Sam Norton. I'm one of the steers for the Road Home program for the volunteer groups. I'm here with my compatriot Leora Kramer. She's a fantastic person and a wonderful co-steer. She will be leading the talk in February, so you'll hear more from her then. We're also joined by Jacob Weber and James Baker. These guys are from RHP, and I'll let them introduce themselves here in a moment. My name's Sam. I'm a veteran of the U.S. Army. I was served for 4 years, deployed to Afghanistan a couple of times. So please feel free to ask any questions you would like to ask. And other than that, I'll just pass it off to the roommate guys.
Hey everyone, my name is James Baker. I am a third-year medical student, and myself and Jake are both in the HPSB program. I'm in the Army and Jake is in the Air Force. If you don't know what that program is, it's essentially a scholarship for medical school with a commitment to serve in residency and then afterwards as a physician. So we started the program, or RHP, last year with the goal of kind of holding events like this to discuss military medical topics. So we're just really excited that CHAPS is willing to hold this event again this year, and it should be a really great event. So thanks everyone for coming.
And for those interested, RHP is the Rush University Military Medicine Interest Group.
Yeah, so here's how we'll do it. I'll have all you guys on mute, and please make sure that you stay on mute for the duration of the presentation. We'll have a Q&A session at the end. Other than that, if you have a question, go ahead and just put it in the chat, and I'll bring it up to CHAPS. We are graced with the amazing presence of Chaplain Mark Schimmel, and I cannot pronounce his full last name. You have to give me Chaps for that.
My friends call me Chaps. We'll leave it at that.
Chaps is good. So without further ado, I'll pass the presentation off to Chaps.
Thank you, Sam, and welcome everyone. I recognize some names here. So I really hope I don't screw this up. Once again, thank you and welcome. My name is Mark Schimmelpfennig. My friends call me Chaps. I am the staff chaplain at the Road Home program. And the way I introduce myself to the men and women who come through our doors is I'm Chaplain Mark. I'm a combat vet. My drug of choice was alcohol, and I've tasted gunmetal on several different occasions. It breaks down a lot of walls. What we're going to talk about today is moral injury, primarily, and making meaning of service, which is one of the primary ways to repair moral injury. And I think all of us have some understanding of PTSD, post-traumatic stress. We know it's caused by a traumatic event. We know some of the effects are the intrusive thoughts, the hypervigilance, the physical sensations, feelings of avoidance, re-experiencing, and then offshoots of this start to become the anger and the irritability and all of those sorts of things. Now, what we have found at the Road Home is that moral injury and PTSD are much more closely aligned than may have first been thought. And papers usually said 20 to 25% of veterans suffering from PTSD also experience moral injury. Here at the Road Home, those numbers are between 70, 75%, possibly even higher. So we've seen that there is a definite correlation, and that correlation is often, very often, endorsed by our veterans that we serve. And in many ways, a vet could be experiencing moral injury, and a lot of times it's described as, I just feel this hole inside. I feel a weight on my shoulders. I feel a wound of the spirit, a wound of the soul. And well, as clinicians, and medical students, people in the healthcare professions, you have a sickness, there is a cure, there is treatments, there is research, etc., etc. And one of the things that has been complicated about moral injury, and it's becoming less complex now because more research is being done with it, is basically, I asked the question, how is your soul? And well, so I come from a much different direction than clinicians traditionally might in treating PTSD and moral injury. So where do we start? There are many definitions of moral injury, but in essence, it's I'm reading from my notes here. It's perpetrating, failing to prevent, bearing witness to, or learning about acts that transgress deeply held moral beliefs or transgressions. So means if you act in a way that violates your own moral code, your own moral compass, if you will, if you observe things that are morally wrong, or if you fail to do something that maybe you should have done, okay, the coulda, woulda, shoulda, if you will, those are all things that can contribute to this. Now, we all have a moral compass, and as I explain it, I am a chaplain. Yes, I do have extensive theological training, but we all have a moral compass that we grew up with and that we've carried with us from a very early age. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou will go to bed on time, you will not mess with your little sister or little brother, etc., etc., etc. Now, faith and being grounded in a faith tradition might be part of this. Indeed, might be part of it. You go to church with your folks, you go to Sunday school, that sort of thing, and you bring whatever faith structure you have with you as part of your moral compass. So if we're talking about the military here, you bring your compass with you, and then you take an oath to suborn yourselves to something greater than you, to serve and protect, etc., etc. And you have standards, practices, and a moral compass that is the military's, that you basically put into and incorporate into yours. Now, let's face it, those moral compasses act in tension with one another. If you're combat arms, if anyone here is a veteran combat arms, what is the mission? Our mission is to kill people, blow stuff up, and protect our country from enemies, foreign and domestic, etc., etc. That distill that down, that is basically the mission of the military. That when you're saying thou shalt not kill, and then you're saying kill or be killed, that's tension. That is serious, significant tension. Then you take a combat tour, or you take exposure to combat situations. You go outside the wire, you suffer trauma, you participate in things, you see things. There are things that you could have did but didn't. That compass shatters, okay? It shatters. How do you put it back together? So that's what we're talking about here. And when we're talking about moral injury, also, there are signs that in a lot of ways are offshoots, if you will, of PTSD symptoms. But some of the core signs of moral injury are going to be things like guilt, shame, spiritual struggles. If you're a person of faith, many times what you've gone through or what you've witnessed puts you at odds with your belief structure. Personally, I felt that I was beyond forgiveness. And so therefore, I was a lost soul. Also, and this is especially true with survivors of military sexual trauma, loss of trust or a breach of trust. If we're talking about theologically, when we were taught to pray, good things would happen. Okay, I prayed when I needed God the most, God wasn't there. Or breach of trust also, if we're talking about MST survivors, an overwhelming percentage of the perpetrators of MST are people who are in your own unit, people that you know, people that are friends, battle buddies, and such. So there is a serious breach of trust there. And some of the secondary signs of this are things like anxiety, sadness, choice to socially alienate. I'm a monster. I don't deserve to have a good life. I don't deserve to be happy. I don't deserve to have the company of other people. I'm angry at myself. I am beyond forgiveness. Should have made another decision. I'm broken. How could the God I believed in let me down? And how can I trust anybody again? I mean, these are all aspects of it, of moral injury. And it's subjective. It's totally subjective to the individual and what they've brought with their moral compass to the situation. So moral injury, besides the psychological aspects of it, it contributes very greatly to something that in the military is, we call it task, meaning, and purpose. Meaning and purpose is so important in our lives, whether you're in the military or not. And if you're in the military, okay, you joined for a reason. What you do, who you serve with, where you serve, where you go, all of those different things give your life meaning and purpose. And there are plenty of tasks that go along with that. So you suffer traumatic events, or you are injured, and you are released from service, or you feel that you have gone too far, or you feel that you're not worthy. That is going to cause a break. That's going to cause a significant loss of meaning and purpose in your life. I call it Tango Mike Papa, and anyone who's in the military knows it's TMP, task, meaning, and purpose. You break with your faith. And even if you're not a person of faith, we have all been brought up with a moral compass, okay? So a personal moral code. And as I mentioned before, it can be difficult to articulate. You know that there's something wrong in there, but you just don't know how to describe it. I mean, if you ask somebody, how do you describe a wound of the soul? If no one's ever asked them that question before, which is very often the case, before I might talk to someone, it's hard to answer. So in some ways, one of the first things you need to do is to name it to tame it. Clinicians treat the traditional psychological and physical symptoms, as we know, and you are all working very hard to achieve those goals. So when I ask, how's your soul? We're getting into a little bit of a different realm. And for me and for my colleagues, at the road home and indeed other places that treat veterans or work with moral injury, one of the things you have to do, and you do as medical professionals, is assess what's wrong, right? You go to the ER, get checked out, get your blood work done, et cetera, et cetera. For someone like myself and my colleagues, we assess the moral compass. What was there before this all happened? What broke? And how do we put it back together? So some of the questions that I might ask would be, once you know what the definition is, how does that apply to you, the individual? And how would you apply that to your own experience? Okay, keep going. One more slide. Whatever.
Sorry about that.
No problem. And then once we have the definitions and such down, then, okay, what are some of the effects that you yourself are experiencing? And in your mind, veteran or whoever, do you see a similarity in the effects of moral injury and PTSD? Okay. One of the best ways that I've ever heard this process described is you completely unpack your rucksack, that big sack you use to carry everything around. And when you're not in the military anymore, for military folks, we're a tribe. Vets are a tribe. And our rites of passage are different things. But unpacking your rucksack and finding a new tribe. Those are some of the basic goals. Now, moral injury, PTSD, it's not just for combat anymore. PTSD got huge press because, you know, it was finally put into context of combat. It was originally in the realm of combat. It used to be called combat fatigue. But it's not just for combat anymore. And any one of us who have been through the COVID pandemic here at Rush, or as part of the Rush family, we know that trauma is trauma. And the effects can be the same type of thing. Guilt, shame, I could have done something more, or I should have done something more to help that patient, okay? So we're talking first responders, medical personnel, chaplains. Bottom line is we all have a moral compass and they can be broken, okay? Go ahead, next slide, please. Thank you, Sam. Okay, so the mission of moral injury repair and what we do at the road home, I put some of this together, and let me just say I could not do this. This could not happen without the whole road home team contributing to this process. We really do have a holistic approach to treatment, and we would not have the success that we have unless it was for everybody. So let me just give a shout out to my peeps, any of you that are out there. So what we've done here is 4 steps. The figuring out what moral injury is, naming it to taming it, and the ultimate goal is reactivating task, meaning, and purpose. Many times veterans will come in and see me, or they'll come in and see their therapist and say, you know, I feel like I've disconnected from my faith. I want to reconnect with it, okay? Self-forgiveness is a very important part in moral injury repair. And I can attest to that myself, because for a long time I felt I was not worthy of forgiveness, whether it be from my fellow man or my maker. And something that I call the wounded healer, For those of you psych majors out there, the wounded healer was actually started by Carl Jung, in that basically we are humans have a tendency to want to help others, and in helping others, it helps us heal our own wounds. A theologian by the name of Henry Nouwen took this concept and elevated it somewhat theologically and spiritually both. And basically a wounded healer is someone who helps others, and through that action helps themselves to heal. But what Nouwen's spin on it is the essential criticality of self-care in the process. How many of you have had to be told, rein it in, you need some rest, just let it go for a bit? Human nature, with what we've chosen to do in our chosen professions, we want to help, we want to make a difference. But if we get burned out and we don't take care of ourselves, what the hell good are we going to be for anybody? All right. Now, every patient's going to have a different starting point because our moral compasses are all different. Everything's subjective. So another thing that I do concurrently with some of these steps is create a moral injury roadmap. What's a template? If we know what's wrong, we know where you're we know where you're coming from. Help me understand how we can fix it. Okay. And that can be a very important first step for a patient to take. Create a kind of roadmap. Okay, go ahead, Sam, if you can. Yeah, okay. Keep going. We already did this one. All right. One of the big things that we do as a team here at Road Home with the clinical modalities that we use cognitive processing therapy primarily. It's about changing perspectives, okay? Now, we all have definitions, say of faith, for instance. In the patient's word, my faith means this, 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 this. Faith, as we know, does not have to be theological. It can be moral or spiritual. Faith traditions and spiritual traditions in childhood contribute significantly to molding moral compass. And if you're able to ask, what did faith look like for you? What did your spirituality look like for you before the break? Okay, then you can have a better chance of being able to help the patient identify the actions or non-actions during and after the trauma that affected this break. Sam? Okay. For people of faith, how did God's role change? Why did God let that happen? My prayers weren't answered. As chaplains, both at the hospital and here at Road Home, deal with this a lot. Why? I don't know. I'm not going to lie to anybody and say that I know what God's plan is. I don't know. And especially when you're talking to a vet who may have lost their best friend very traumatically, or even in the hospital when somebody who has been incredibly healthy and seems to be on the road to recovery all of a sudden passes. I don't know. I don't know why that happens. So creating an impact statement for this that's revolved around the trauma. And not only that, but how did the patient lose faith? What happened? What is missing now? And then what would it take to get it back? Would it be forgiveness? Would it be changing perspective? Would it be things like that? Because with cognitive processing therapy, what we do is we change perspectives. In that many times, when I say you started at 100%, in that it's my fault my buddy died. it's my fault that that patient passed away because I could have done A, B, C, D. Okay. We changed the perspectives on this by doing things like asking questions relevant to the time right before the trauma, during the trauma, and after the trauma. Like, for instance, if I would have seen that IED buried in the road at night, my best friend would be alive today. So we would ask questions such as, was it during the day? No, it was at night. Were you looking in the direction of the IED? No, my zone of responsibility was 6 o'clock, so that was to the rear. Okay. Did you have night vision goggles? No. How far away were you from the blast itself? Well, the blast took the first Humvee out. I was 5 Humvees back. Okay, so we are not denying the event. We are not denying the traumatic aspect of the event, but or the sadness of it, the loss of it. But what we are doing is changing perspective. So if you started at 100% and said, it's my fault, okay, and you start asking these questions and you get the answers, most often, that percentage will start to decrease. And in that space, there's room now for new thoughts to take hold. Okay. We're hopefully by the end of the treatment, you might be down to 30 or 40% blame. Okay. My buddy died. I feel horrible about it, but all of these things contributed to the reality of the situation where there wasn't really anything I could do. So that'd be an example of that process. Or a lot of times I get this with combat medics. And in my COVID rounds and being on the COVID wellness team over at the hospital, you know, I will talk to doctors and nurses and such about the ones that they lost. You could have saved 300 people, but you will remember the 3 you lost. So changing perspective. What about those people you did help? How many lives did you help to save? What about those times you did make a difference? Okay. And many times, you know, we were talking about battle buddies, friends, bros, if you will, brothers and sisters. Why were they your friend? Why was this person your friend? Why did you love them? Okay. And there's a slide here on anniversaries, but when you think about your friend, okay, many times, and maybe this is true for some of you, you know, outside the military, but trust me, combat vets understand anniversaries very, very well. They mean forget their wedding anniversary, but they will darn sure remember the anniversaries when they lost bros or sisters in combat or traumatic things happened. Okay. So how do you celebrate? Many vets will tell you they get drunk and stupid, they kick the dog, they yell at their kids, they withdraw, they become angry and irritable, impossible to live with, etc., etc., etc. Okay. Well, why don't we change the perspective of that anniversary? Why was that person your friend? Why did you love them? Okay. If you had an opportunity, what would you say to them? If your friend was here, what would you say to them? Many times it'll be, you know, I screwed up. You know, I'm sorry. Then I'll ask the question, what do you think they would say to you? And almost invariably, you'll hear basically, you know what, pull your head out of your rear, move on, it's okay, you know, live. Many of you might have seen Private Ryan at the end when Tom Hanks is dying, and he says to Matt Damon, "Earn this." A variation of that is what an overwhelming majority of vets will say that their friends will tell them. So if you can tell me why you love that person, what they would say to you, what you would say to them, you're changing the celebration of an anniversary of death, with which you're celebrating death, into a celebration of life and remembrance. In loss, those people that we know and love have given us a gift, and that gift is remembering, okay? And that gift can be very transformational and very powerful. And I'll often put up, do you know what year your friend was born? No. Do you know what date they died? Well, September 12th, 2011. Okay. So I'll put another birth date in there, arbitrary, and I'll point at the dash. I'll say, what does that mean? What does that represent? The dash between the dates. It represents a life well lived. Why not celebrate that? And more importantly, your role in that, even though it may have been a comparatively short time, it was powerful. Okay, Sam? Self-forgiveness. This is one of the most important phases of moral injury repair. If we're talking theology here, I cannot be forgiven or God will not forgive me. Remembrance as penance, okay? If I don't remember my friend, if I forget my friend, I am dissing his sacrifice and his memory. Okay, that's basically what we're talking about here. All right, so I have to remember. I have to keep myself in this state. I don't deserve to get better, because if I do, then I'm going to forget about him or her, and that would be dissing them. Okay. Cognitive processing therapy's role in assisting in this process through lowering the sense of guilt and responsibility allows that gap, that space for alternative thoughts to form. And one of probably the most when a patient would be to that particular point, I'll ask the questions like this. Now that you have more perspective, you know, now that you understand what really went on, can you begin to forgive yourself? And that can be transformative. Or if we're talking about someone who is strong in their faith or would like to be reconnected in their faith, and I'm using a Christian example here. If God forgives you, do you think it would be okay with God if you forgive yourself? Also, you know, if we're talking about aspects of prayer, which is obviously very important from a chaplain's point of view, the traditional prayers that one might be useful, that one might be used to and one might be used to using, often don't work. You're past that, okay? So one of the things I offer is, have you told God your story in your own words, from your perspective, from your point of view? Many vets will say no. But you know what? That sounds like a good idea. And if we're talking about breaches of trust, you know, I prayed to you, I thought you'd keep me safe and you didn't, the breaches of trust. you know, you've got a problem with God based on what happened. Can you forgive God? If you're going to meet somebody wherever they're at, that's a valid question. Sam? Okay, task, meaning, purpose, and the wounded healer. What we're trying to do here at the road home is reestablish meaning and purpose through tasking, again, for the veteran. Now, when we were in the military, that kind of took care of itself. We had a job, we had our battle buddies, we had our mission, we had the tasks that we were ordered to do in order to complete that. Things have changed, okay? You don't have that meaning and purpose that you had when you were in the military. Life has changed. And you'll hear many vets talk about, I feel like a ship without a rudder. I don't feel like I have any meaning. There's no purpose in my life. That's why I sit home and draw the curtains and keep a gun in my lap while I watch TV, okay? Well, what would you like to do in a perfect world? Well, I'd like to do this, 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 and this, okay? Have you tried? No, I can't. I can't do it. I can't. I'm not ready for it. Then I'll ask, or we will ask, well, what are you doing to help other people right now? And it's kind of interesting because invariably you'll get answers where you didn't think you would, but you do. Well, I help out with my son's baseball team. Oh, well, I fix motorcycles for veterans, or I help out with my church, or I help out in the soup kitchen, or I do this, I do that. It's like, okay, you're already helping others, but you didn't realize it, okay? So how do you feel, or more specifically, when you're doing these things, how does that help you to feel? Well, yeah, it's great. You know, I feel like I'm doing something. I have some meaning. I have some purpose. Okay. You just answered your own question. Okay. And if so, you've already begun doing this. Okay. In helping others. So how hard would it be for you to find something that really you can be passionate about, and what would compel you to get out of your comfort zone and go for it? And if it's still hard, one of the questions I'll ask, well, how many of you would help another vet? Everybody's hand goes up. Okay. There are so many different veterans organizations out there that will help other vets, everything from Bible study to fly fishing, and just about everything in between. Okay. You might be afraid to go to Walmart, but if you're talking with other vets, maybe that's a first step, kind of get your toe in the water, okay? So again, going back to Jung and Nouwen, we're all wounded, but through helping others, we can heal ourselves. What does that look like to you, okay? And it's okay to be scared. This is hard, getting out of your comfort zone, at least up to this point. So a path of least resistance might be hooking up with other veterans, or, you know, if you're a nurse, other nurses, if you're a doc, other docs, whatever that looks like. And a question that is vital here, critical: what brings you joy? What brings you joy? You may not, it may take you a while to figure it out, but it could be something that, you know, while you were growing up, music or something along those lines. What brings you joy now? Maybe it's getting out in the woods and going fishing, or playing with your kids. It doesn't matter. What brings you joy? It allows you to begin the reconnection process. Sam? What are your passions? You know, what have you always wanted to try, but you never got around to it because you were too busy making excuses? In my case, it was fly fishing. So I'm looking forward to hopefully being able to fly fish this spring. And, you know, what would you like to get back to? What brings you joy? What are your passions? What could be your passions if you gave yourself a chance? And as I said before, Nouwen elevated the whole concept of the wounded healer by emphasizing the importance of self-care. And again, this is something that we all need to be cognizant of, and probably we've already, you know, had a run-in with where we need to be doing more of it. So what do you do for self-care? Could be anything. There's no right or wrong answer. But what recharges your emotional, spiritual, and physical batteries? Okay. And in many ways, for the veteran, or you know, somebody that we're working with in this context, commit to a list of tasks. I'm going to join a veterans group. I am going to go back to night school. I am going to take my little girl to ballet lessons. Doesn't matter what it is. List of tasks that will help you regain that sense of meaning and purpose, regain that joy. Acknowledge that you need to take care of yourself. Prioritize it, and then by God, you gotta follow through. Okay. And I think that's the last slide I have. Thank you. Sam had told me that one of the questions that people have been asking him is, if I'm in the hospital and I run into a vet, what do I say? Or how do I diffuse the situation? Or how do I get over my fear and discomfort in, you know, dealing with someone who may be going through a rough time or having an episode or anything like that. And I'd also like to say that, you know, I'm talking about, and what I talked about today is what we do at the road home. But as people in the RUSH community, what we've seen in the past 10 months, this is just as applicable to any floor in the hospital as it is over here, okay? So I'll take any questions you have, and thank you so very much for your attention and listening. Sam, do you have any questions? Anybody have any questions?
Sure, I'll ask one. What do you say to someone who says, I wish my buddy and I had changed places. I wish, you know, I was the one who died or got injured, and I wish they were the one who didn't.
So survivor's guilt, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. That is, we'll see a lot of that. And you know, for me, this is just my opinion as a humble chaplain. I think it's human nature that we feel that way in those situations. But I will go back to, all right, I could see that. You acknowledge it. You allow them to normalize that feeling. Then, you know, why was that person your friend in the first place? What did you love about them? What did they love about you? If they were here right now, what would you like to say? Would you tell them that? Or would you say something different? And then just as importantly, what do you think they would say back to you? And that can be a significant first step in beginning to address that kind of survivor's guilt. I hope that helps answer your question.
Hey, Chap. So thanks again. I know for me personally, I have a hard time just opening up to especially new folks about anything that I've been through. Or, you know, I know a lot of my friends, they're very quiet and they're very reserved, and they don't really speak to any capacity as to some of the things that they've been through. As a healthcare professional, what advice do you have to like build that trust relationship so that the veteran
Well,
opens up to you?
Okay, I'm a vet. There are several vets who work at the road home too, and I'm honored to know them all. But the majority of people who work here, who are involved in direct patient care, outreach, call it whatever you want, are not. So one of the big things that we work with is trust, the establishment of trust. And they may not be a vet. Your therapist may not be a vet. Your provider may not be a vet. Use that word. But if you're able to effectively communicate to them that you're there for them, they are not alone. Okay? They are not alone. You're there to help. And you can show that through actions rather than words. You will gain trust. Okay? You will gain that trust. And one of the things that vets say to us that is so significant and meaningful to all of us at the road home is, you people really care. And that's huge. Now, you're talking about people who may not have, you know, they haven't shared your experience. You're not sure how to talk to them about it. That's okay. Sam, you're not the only vet at Rush, okay? Like-minded people. Who at Rush is of the same tribe you are? There's a lot of Rush veterans out there. You know, reach out to some of them. Or don't be afraid to say, on the converse of that, don't be afraid to say, you know, I know you care. I know you're asking out of a position of caring, and you really want to know, or you really want to help or whatever. Don't be afraid to say, I'm not comfortable talking about it. But you know, if you do want people to talk to, reach out to another vet. Hell, call me. You can talk anytime you want. For those of you who haven't met me, you probably can figure out that I'm not really you know, I meet people where they're at. And if faith is part of that, then fine. If not, that's okay too. The conversation isn't about me, it's about you. Okay? I hope that helps answer your question. Who's next?
I had a question.
Hi, Emily, how are you?
Hi, good. How are you? I'm an OT student, but I'm also an Army brat. So I really like the intersection of healthcare and veteran medicine. But I was kind of wondering, as a healthcare provider, how can we help someone who has unaddressed trauma and doesn't really want to address it? How can we help them to move to a point where they can acknowledge they have trauma and it's okay to have trauma and to address that?
That is a fantastic question. Avoidance is one of the really big issues when we're talking about unresolved trauma. You box it, you bury it deeply, and then you burn the map so you don't have to find it again, or you can convince yourself you don't have to visit it again. But trauma has a way of sneaking up on all of us, and it usually comes out in pretty nasty ways. If you sense that there is unresolved trauma with a patient, and obviously it doesn't have to be a veteran, and the patient doesn't want to talk about it, collaborate. Begin to collaborate with other people who might have better luck or might be better versed in how to approach these particular situations. Like Sam said in his question, is like, it's really hard for me to talk about some of the things I've been through with people who don't know. And that's natural for anyone in any situation. So again, collaborate, find someone who might be a veteran. Find someone who might have experience with with patients who have unresolved trauma, and help them help the patient. And it's a great learning opportunity for you. And one of the things I've been advocating for is, when a patient comes into the hospital, whether it be in the ER or admitting, I wish there was something on there that said, "Are you a veteran?" Okay. And even if nothing happens, or there isn't a potential situation there, and it's like, okay, well, maybe we should be cognizant of, and we should understand that there might be something down the line. Now, is that a reason for you to be afraid? No, no. If you've run into situations with patients or veterans, we're talking about the trauma here and whatnot, avoidance is huge. You're in the hospital, you're coming to treatment, you're might be looking at a major surgery, or you might be coming to the road home, and this is your last chance. Otherwise, you're going to lose your family and your kids. There's a lot of pressure. And how many times do we kind of fall back on what we know as a protective mechanism for us? Okay, so the avoidance, the anger, get the hell out of my room, etc., etc. They're scared. It comes from a position, from a place of fear. And many people have, even though they may not have managed it very well, they've managed to get through that trauma, those situations, to the point where they can function, okay? But now you're in a position where you are giving that control up, all right? And that can be very, very scary. So if you see it, you sense it, bring in some people who might be able to help break the ice with them, and then learn with them. So you have a better perspective, and you have more experience that might be able to help you the next patient down the way.
Thank you for answering that.
You're most welcome. Anybody else?
Hey chaps, this is Michael O'Connell. I'm an Army
Hey, Mike.
veteran myself.
Yes.
And
Mike is a colleague of mine at the road home as well. So anyway, Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, you one of the slides kind of talked about, like, we all come in with like a moral compass, right? And some people are, I don't want to say like sensitive, but right, like they've done things in like the normal course of their duties that most people would be like, oh, okay, like that sounds fine, but they're like racked with like guilt over it.
Mm-hmm.
And other times people have done things that you might label or think to yourself like, oh, this is like clearly like a war crime, and they seem like unaffected by this at all. How do you kind of place yourself, and I guess like maybe some things like not to say to people, or for people inexperienced with this, how do you kind of get yourself like on their level, or how do you kind of
Mike, what I first try to do is get as much information from that person as possible. What did that moral compass look like before, possibly, or what does it look like now? And as you know, at the road home, we deal with some pretty heavy traumatic things, events and such. And if the guilt and the shame can lead to that kind of numbing, that deadening of emotion, and that avoidance is manifested by anger and pushing people away. So my suggestion would be, all right, here's your trauma, here's the index trauma we're working on right now, but how did things look for you before? And what do you feel are the biggest changes afterwards? The more information you have, the better you'll be able to connect the dots. And again, pull in collaborative resources. Does that make sense? Because you have to meet these people wherever they are at. We all have a moral compass, but it's uniquely our own. So the more information you have about that, the more intel you have about that, you know, the easier it might be for you to navigate.
Well, thanks, Chaplain. I mean, you get to a good point of just being curious, and someone might say, oh, you know, A, B, and C happen. I feel really bad about it, and get to like drilling down of like, what part is that? And then getting back to, you know, Emily's point about, you know, working with people who kind of unaddressed trauma is for us to understand as, you know, providers, what are the symptoms of trauma, and like, you know, to even like normalize like some of these things if people disclose things, and to normalize.
You know, PTSD again is not just for combat anymore. Trauma is trauma. It could happen. You know, car accident. You know, I couldn't, you know, I tried to help my mother when she had a heart attack and she passed away. It could be anything, okay? But so those traumas happen, and there are things that happen before, during, and after the trauma as well. Where we get the post-traumatic stress from it, as you know, is we get stuck on that event and our interpretation of what happened. So again, it comes down to information, context, asking the questions, getting that info, and then finding ways to connect the dots to lower that percentage and allow alternative thoughts to come in.
Thanks, Chaps.
Welcome. Well, Sam, it's 12:58, and you folks probably have plenty more interesting things to do than to listen to me spout. So I would just like to thank you all so very much for your attentiveness and for your questions. And if anybody wants to talk about any of this, reach out, call the road home and ask for Chaps. And I'm happy to talk, happy to help in any way I can. Peace.
Thank you so much. Have a good day, everybody.
Thanks, Chaps.
Thanks,
Have a good day,
Chaps.
everyone.
Peace.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for your help, Sam. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for doing this for us. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for stopping by, Dr. Dugan.
Hey, my pleasure, Chappie. Anything for you. Always learning new stuff. I was eating lunch, so I didn't show my face in between patients. Have a good one, everybody.
Peace.
See ya.
Have a good day. Take care, everybody.